The door clicked shut behind me, and she whispered, "We'll show you something special." In that instant, everything I thought I knew about her, and myself, shifted. The office was quiet, the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel amplified, the soft hum of the air conditioner, the distant clatter of a janitor's broom, even the faint tick of the wall clock. I had stayed late again, pushing through my workload, but my attention kept drifting toward her, the boss's assistant. She was not just competent. There was a grace to her that seemed effortless, like she moved through the world without ever having to rush. As she walked past me to organize some files, I caught the subtle click of her heels against the polished floor, a rhythm that somehow drew my focus despite myself. There was a warmth in her presence, not loud or overpowering, but quiet and steady, like sunlight pooling in a corner. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, a delicate mix of something floral and calming, that lingered just long enough to tease my senses as she moved. She glanced at me, and for a brief moment, her eyes held a flicker of recognition, not just as a colleague, but as someone noticing me, really noticing. I felt a strange combination of embarrassment and thrill, like I had been caught staring but in the best possible way. My chest tightened slightly, not in panic, but in awareness. She smiled, a gentle curve of her lips that seemed to invite conversation yet never demanded it. I tried to focus on my work, but my eyes kept straying back. The way she tilted her head while reading a document, how her fingers traced lines of text as though feeling them with her fingertips, even the soft brush of her hair as she tucked a loose strand behind her ear, it all struck me. Small, seemingly insignificant gestures, yet each one carried a weight, a subtle pull I couldn't name. When she noticed me lingering, she didn't call me out or frown. Instead, there was a quiet curiosity in her expression, a small lift of her brow that made my stomach flutter. It was clear she sensed something unspoken between us, something that wasn't just professional attention. And then came the moment that made everything shift. She paused by the office door, glanced over her shoulder, and in a low, almost conspiratorial voice said, "We'll show you something special." The words weren't just an invitation, they were a spark, igniting a mix of anticipation and hesitation. My heart beat a little faster, not with fear, but with curiosity and a strange, thrilling sense of being included in a private world I wasn't usually allowed to see. I felt a flicker of nervous excitement. What did she mean by that? Was it a project, a personal insight, or something more? Even as my mind raced, I noticed the subtle grace of her hand resting momentarily on the edge of the door frame, the gentle arch of her back as she leaned slightly closer than necessary. Every small detail became magnified, the warmth in her gaze, the quiet steadiness of her presence. And in that suspended moment, I realized something had shifted between us. It wasn't loud, it wasn't immediate, it was the kind of spark that grew quietly, almost imperceptibly, but with enough force to make me both apprehensive and strangely exhilarated. I took a slow breath, reminding myself this was still the office, still a professional setting. But a part of me already knew, whatever she was about to show me would change the rhythm of my days forever. She turned toward me, the corner of her mouth lifting in that small, knowing smile that had already begun to haunt my thoughts. "Come on," she said softly, and I followed, my steps tentative. The hallway felt narrower, quieter now, the usual office bustle reduced to a faint echo in the distance. Every sound seemed sharper, the click of our shoes on the floor, the rustle of papers, the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above. She reached a door at the far end of the corridor, a polished wooden slab that looked unremarkable in daylight but somehow gained significance in this moment. Her hand lingered on the handle, a delicate touch, just long enough for me to notice the warmth of her skin brushing against mine as she guided me forward. My pulse quickened. I told myself it was silly, just a hand on a door, but in that contact, fleeting and light, there was something grounding, intimate, and electric all at once. The door swung closed behind us with a soft click, and the world outside seemed to disappear. The muted office noises faded, leaving us in a small space that felt suspended in time. The faint scent of her perfume wrapped around me, warm and comforting yet subtly provocative, like a whispered secret meant only for me. My eyes took in the room, modestly decorated, personal touches hinting at her life beyond the office. The careful arrangement of books, the small framed photographs, the soft throw draped over a chair, everything radiated quiet elegance and a sense of order. She moved closer, not in an overtly intimate way, but in the way someone moves towards someone they trust, someone they are willing to share a moment with. Her presence filled the room in the most understated way, and I felt it, the gravity of being near her. My chest tightened slightly, the warmth spreading through me, a heady mixture of anticipation and hesitation. "Are you comfortable?" she asked, her voice gentle, casual, yet carrying an unspoken weight. Her eyes met mine, steady, unflinching, yet there was a spark of curiosity there, as though she was daring me to let my guard down. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry, and she gave a small nod in return, as if acknowledging a shared understanding. She gestured toward the center of the room, guiding me to a small seating area. The subtle brush of her fingers against my shoulder, as she passed, left an echo on my skin, lingering long after she stepped back. It was deliberate yet natural, casual yet intimate, one of those moments that seems ordinary until you realize the quiet intensity behind it. We stood there for a beat too long, our eyes meeting, the silence stretching in a way that felt charged. My mind raced with a dozen conflicting thoughts: professional boundaries, the age difference, the thrill of the unknown. And yet, there was no tension in the room that felt wrong. It was electric in a quiet, restrained way, like the calm before a storm, or the pause before a revelation you know will shift everything. Finally, she smiled, a soft, unassuming curve of her lips, and whispered, "I think you'll like this." That simple line, so easy in its delivery, sent a jolt through me. I realized I was standing at the edge of something new, something unspoken yet potent, and with that closed door between us and the rest of the world, I was ready, part curious, part cautious, to see what she had in store. She motioned for me to sit, her movements fluid and unhurried, each gesture carrying a quiet grace that made me acutely aware of her presence. The chair creaked slightly under my weight, and I realized how small details, the warmth of the seat, the gentle hum of the room's quiet, made everything feel more intimate. She settled across from me, her posture relaxed yet deliberate, and I noticed the subtle tilt of her head, the way the soft light caught the highlights in her hair, casting faint glimmers against her skin. "This is what I wanted to show you," she said softly, pulling out a folder from her desk. The contents were clearly something personal, something she had poured herself into over time. I leaned in slightly to see, and she didn't move back. Her closeness was natural, not forced, but it sent a ripple of warmth through me. The air between us seemed charged in the most understated way, like an invisible thread connecting us through shared curiosity. As she explained, her hands moved expressively, tracing lines on the pages, adjusting papers just so, occasionally brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Each small motion felt deliberate yet intimate, a subtle invitation to observe, to understand, to connect. I caught myself noticing the warmth of her hands, the soft inflection in her voice, and the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about something she clearly cared about. There was a vulnerability beneath the confidence, a quiet truth she wasn't saying outright but that I felt in every glance, every slight shift in her expression. I asked a question, and she paused before answering, letting me linger on the anticipation for just a moment too long. Her response was measured, thoughtful, and when our eyes met, it felt like a private exchange, a fleeting acknowledgement that something was passing between us beyond words. I realized I was paying attention to more than just her explanation. I was noticing the small details that made her, her. The subtle curve of her smile, the delicate way she leaned forward, the faint scent of her perfume mixing with the crisp air of the office. At one point, our hands brushed, accidental, perhaps, but long enough to make my pulse quicken. She didn't pull away immediately, just let the contact linger, a simple, human touch that spoke volumes. It was grounding and electric all at once, a reminder that she was here, present, sharing this moment with me in a way that felt meaningful. I found myself opening up too, sharing thoughts I rarely voiced at work. My voice was quieter than usual, almost hesitant, but there was comfort in her steady gaze, in the subtle nods and soft smiles that encouraged me without pressing. For a moment, it felt like the outside world didn't exist, like this small room, this shared project, and this quiet attention were all that mattered. When she leaned back, stretching slightly, her eyes flicked to mine, and a small, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. That fleeting expression held an unspoken understanding, a gentle acknowledgement that we had crossed a threshold, one of trust, subtle attraction, and quiet intimacy. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but the energy between us had shifted, imperceptibly yet irreversibly. By the time the folder was closed, and the papers neatly stacked, I realized that the special thing she had shown me wasn't just the project, it was the way she allowed me into a private corner of her world. And in that sharing, a connection had formed, slow and deliberate, warm and quietly thrilling. After our quiet shared moment, I stepped back into the hallway, but the warmth of her presence seemed to linger on my skin, like a faint echo that refused to fade. My mind raced with thoughts I hadn't expected to confront: professional boundaries, office gossip, the unspoken age difference. But beneath it all was a quiet thrill, a sense of exhilaration I hadn't felt in a long time. As I walked toward my desk, I found myself replaying the way her fingers had brushed the edge of the folder, the subtle tilt of her head as she explained her project, the faint curve of her smile when our eyes met. Each detail lingered, magnified in my awareness. The office, once a familiar and predictable space, now seemed charged with possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. I shook my head, trying to focus on the reports awaiting me, but every time I glanced toward her office, my gaze lingered. There was a tension I couldn't ignore, a magnetic pull that wasn't just physical. It was in the way she carried herself, her quiet confidence, the ease with which she navigated the space, and yet there was a vulnerability too, a softness beneath the professionalism that drew me in without a word. I caught myself imagining simple touches, our hands brushing as we passed documents, the warmth of her shoulder as she guided me through a task, the quiet intimacy of shared glances across a crowded office. Each thought carried an ache of longing, tempered by a cautious awareness that acting on it could have consequences. Yet the hesitation itself was part of the thrill. It made every glance, every small interaction, feel electric, like we were dancing on the edge of something neither of us fully named. During a brief pause in the workday, I found myself standing near her desk again, ostensibly to drop off a file, but really to linger a moment longer. She looked up, and her eyes met mine with that same steady curiosity. For a heartbeat, we just held the gaze, a quiet conversation without words. My chest tightened, a mixture of anticipation, guilt, and desire that was almost overwhelming. I wanted to reach out, to let my hand brush hers, but I hesitated, acutely aware of the line between office etiquette and personal desire. The air felt heavier somehow, charged with unspoken emotions. The faint scent of her perfume reminded me that she was near, that she had left an invisible mark on the space around me. I noticed the soft rustle of her cardigan as she leaned back in her chair, the gentle rhythm of her breathing, the way her lips curved when she smiled, small gestures that spoke louder than words. I left her desk, forcing myself to return to my work, but a part of me remained in that quiet, suspended space between us. I realized the connection wasn't fleeting, it was layered, complex, and slowly rooting itself in my awareness. My admiration for her competence mingled with curiosity, fascination, and a growing awareness of desire, each emotion vying for dominance. By the end of the day, I was left with a bittersweet ache, a mixture of longing and restraint. I knew that I was standing at the edge of something delicate, a connection I wanted to explore yet had to navigate with care. Every glance, every accidental touch, every shared smile had begun to etch itself into my consciousness. And I understood, with an almost painful clarity, that whatever unfolded next would require honesty, courage, and patience, the kind of slow-burning intimacy that could not be rushed. The office was nearly empty now, the soft hum of the air conditioner the only sound punctuating the quiet. The city outside was fading into evening, the golden light filtering through the blinds casting long, warm stripes across the floor. I found myself standing near her desk, unsure whether to linger or leave, when she looked up from her notes. Our eyes met, and the usual professional barriers seemed to dissolve in that single, quiet exchange. She gestured toward a chair beside her desk, an unspoken invitation. As I sat, our proximity felt different, charged with a tension that neither of us spoke aloud. Her hand rested on the edge of the desk, fingers lightly brushing mine as she handed me a document. The contact was brief but deliberate, and the warmth of her skin against mine sent a ripple through my chest, subtle yet undeniable. I felt my pulse quicken, a quiet awareness of closeness that I had never experienced in the office before. For a few moments, we simply worked side by side, our shoulders brushing occasionally. Each touch, accidental or not, seemed magnified, a soft graze as she leaned to reach a pen, the faint heat of her arm near mine, the delicate brush of her hair as it fell forward while she focused. Every small gesture held a weight, a silent language of intimacy we were only beginning to speak. Then she paused, looking at me with a softness that made my chest tighten. "I'm glad you stayed," she said, her voice low, warm, almost confiding. I swallowed, trying to steady the sudden flutter of emotions that her words stirred. It wasn't just a compliment. It was the honesty behind it, the sense that I mattered to her in a way that transcended work. As if sensing my hesitation, she reached out, not boldly, but naturally, her fingers brushing lightly against my hand to guide it toward a stack of papers. The warmth of her touch lingered longer than necessary, and I didn't pull away. There was an unspoken rhythm to it, a slow, deliberate intimacy that made the office feel smaller, quieter, and entirely ours. My thoughts scattered. Every professional boundary I had clung to seemed distant, almost irrelevant compared to the quiet thrill of this shared moment. Her gaze met mine again, and I felt an unspoken question in the way she looked at me. "Do you feel this too?" I nodded subtly, not trusting my voice, and her lips curved into that small, knowing smile that always left me breathless. The tension hung between us, palpable yet unhurried, like the space before a spark becomes a flame. Time seemed to stretch. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the soft warmth of the room, the subtle rise and fall of her shoulders as she breathed, the way the fading sunlight caught the edges of her hair, making it glow. Every sense was heightened, every touch amplified, until even the simplest interaction, a shared glance, a brushing of fingers, felt like a profound declaration. And in that intimate, suspended moment, I realized that this wasn't about rushing forward or breaking rules. It was about presence, closeness, and the quiet understanding that had formed between us. The connection was slow-burning, deliberate, and wholly intoxicating, leaving me aware of her in every nerve, every heartbeat, every quiet breath. The office had emptied almost completely, leaving only the faint hum of the air conditioning and the soft rustle of papers on desks. The evening light streamed through the blinds, painting stripes of gold across the floor and casting a warm glow over everything. We were alone, yet it didn't feel awkward. It felt like the space itself had softened, creating a private bubble where words and emotions could flow without pretense. She leaned back in her chair, stretching slightly, and for the first time, I noticed the subtle lines at the corners of her eyes, the softness in her posture when she thought no one was watching. There was a quiet vulnerability in her that I hadn't seen before, beneath the confident exterior that usually defined her presence. And in that vulnerability, I felt an invitation, an unspoken permission to let my own guard down. "I don't often share this," she said, her voice low and careful. "But sometimes I wonder if people really see me, or just what they expect to see." Her fingers toyed with the edge of a paper, tracing the corner absent-mindedly, and I felt an almost magnetic pull toward her. I nodded slowly, understanding in a way that surprised even me. It wasn't just sympathy, it was recognition. She was sharing a truth, and I felt trusted, included in something private. I found myself responding with honesty I usually reserved for close friends. I spoke of doubts, insecurities, the quiet anxiety of feeling too young, too inexperienced, too unsure. As the words left me, I became aware of her attentiveness, not just hearing me, but listening, absorbing each nuance, each pause. Her gaze was steady and warm, her presence a soft anchor against the surge of my own thoughts. At one point, our hands brushed lightly as I reached for a folder. The contact was brief, yet the warmth lingered, a tactile echo of connection that words could not capture. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers rested near mine for just a moment longer, subtle, deliberate, yet entirely natural. That quiet touch spoke volumes. Comfort, reassurance, a shared understanding of unspoken truths. We sat in silence for a while after that, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full of awareness and closeness. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, the gentle rise and fall of her shoulders with each breath, the way her hair fell softly across her collarbone. There was an intimacy in the ordinary details, a sense of being present with someone wholly, without pretense or expectation. I think, she finally whispered, that it's rare to find someone you can just be with, without worrying about how it should look. Her words hung between us, soft yet heavy with meaning. I felt a deep stirring in my chest, a mixture of relief, longing, and recognition. In that moment, it became clear, the connection we shared was more than fleeting attraction. It was trust, understanding, and the quiet, deliberate intimacy of souls meeting slowly, carefully, without rushing. The walls between us, professional, societal, internal, were softening, giving way to something real and profoundly moving. As the evening light shifted, casting longer shadows across the room, I realized that this special thing she had shown me was not just her project, her ideas, or even her presence. It was her willingness to share herself, fully and honestly, and in doing so, invite me to do the same. And I knew, in that quiet, suspended moment, that this trust would define the path ahead, delicate yet undeniable, warm and quietly thrilling. The office was bathed in the soft glow of evening, the city outside quieting down, lights flickering like distant stars. The hum of computers had faded, replaced by the occasional shuffle of papers or the muted creak of a chair. We were alone, yet it no longer felt heavy or tense. Instead, it felt like the world had shrunk to this warm, golden space, where only the two of us existed for a brief, precious moment. We stood near the window, the fading sunlight spilling across her face, highlighting the gentle curve of her smile and the warmth in her eyes. She leaned slightly against the ledge, her posture relaxed, yet there was a gravity in her presence that drew me closer without a word. I felt the subtle pull of proximity, the kind of magnetic energy that doesn't need to be named, it simply exists, undeniable and real. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume again, mingling with the soft warmth of the room. Our hands brushed as I adjusted a paper on the ledge, a fleeting touch that lingered just long enough to make the pulse quicken. She didn't pull away, either did I. Instead, we simply allowed the contact, letting the quiet electricity between us settle into something comfortable, tender. "You know," she said softly, almost to herself, "I wasn't sure I could show someone this, and have them really understand." Her voice carried the vulnerability I had come to recognize, the honesty that had formed the foundation of our connection. I reached out instinctively, my hand brushing hers in a gesture that felt both protective and reverent. "I understand," I murmured, "more than you know." She smiled, a slow, gentle curve of her lips that made the warmth in my chest expand. For the first time, I felt completely at ease in her presence, not just physically close, but emotionally present, connected in a way that transcended professional boundaries or societal expectations. There was no rush, no need to define what this was. It simply existed, slow-burning, intimate, quietly profound. We moved to sit together in the small seating area, side by side, the space between us comfortable, almost seamless. Our shoulders touched lightly, her arm brushing against mine, and I felt the steady reassurance of her presence. There was no urgency, only the quiet intimacy of shared space, of hearts attuned to each other's rhythms. I could hear the faint rise and fall of her breath, the subtle cadence of her heartbeat through the thin fabric of her sleeve. We shared a smile, lingering, unspoken, an acknowledgement of what had grown between us, a connection built on trust, honesty, and the delicate dance of unspoken desire. It was a moment that didn't need to be labeled. Its meaning was self-evident in every gesture, every glance, every shared breath. As the light outside deepened into night, we stayed there, quietly together, letting the warmth of the moment settle. I realized then that the special thing she had promised was not an object, a revelation, or a secret project. It was this: the gift of connection, of presence, of allowing someone to truly see you, and to be seen in return. And in that gentle, golden evening, I understood that the story wasn't about rushing forward, breaking rules, or defying expectations. It was about the slow, steady building of trust, intimacy, and affection, the kind that lingers long after the moment has passed, leaving a warmth in your chest that feels quietly, infinitely special.